당저 예래 언제 난지 세상 동화 뒤교 말해지래 나 동화 미디어 봐도 동화디 뉴가를 때는 용고래 생각한 중에 당한 전에 네비기 연소 등한 중에 안에 자오 녀몽바디레스 세상 한 중에 예디비 녀몽바디 뒤다도 안에 개와 토마메 바네 내디 버동한 줄이야 동화 제자 강아진 되바래 제자 동화 규차래요 제가 디네자 내노 아니 마음바나양 녀몽바디 마파바이나 내노 녀몽바디기 맞은 얘기지 당한 줄이야 동화 유 제자한 줄이야 안 동화 제겐데 다원원이 당한 줄이 녀몽바디레스 제가 디네자 저기디 녀몽바디데 배주의 제제 준주지 녀몽바 녀몽바디지 방고고레스 녀몽바 마파바이나 아저 디네기 녀몽바 디마바베데 녀몽바디랑 한 동화 빠도 매바 제게 체디디기 동화 마오바나 가서다 냐와다 디네기 동화 빠도 매바 동화 유체고레 제자 디네자다 녀몽바 녀몽바디 방고레스 제자 디네 빠베 갑리양 저기다 즉 류야 강하다 셈야 강을 초베네 델야 어당에 깔깔하도 녀몽 빠투사 말에 셈비게 셈 안에 빠슈미하다 아다딘 다른 제도 사마를 마음반의 진신 파 주도신 파장 제샤바 도신의 현재는 마샤바 제 배주의 제제 녀몽바디 방고고 님보 댄제요 방고래 세식이 생각서 나 님보디 되고 주로 학생이 말이야.
Good evening. All of us here, all beings everywhere, we share at a fundamental level a deep desire to abide in happiness, to never experience any problems or sufferings or difficulties. But the reality of our situation is, despite wanting to abide in lasting happiness, we all do experience problem upon problem, difficulty upon difficulty. So as we've been looking at for the last little while, these problems and difficulties we experience, each and every one comes from the same cause, and that cause is to be found within, from our own afflictions. And these afflictions, they've been tormenting us not only throughout this life, but through each and every life preceding this, since beginning this time. And they will continue to harm us in our life after this and the life after that. This is all afflictions do, is they harm us, they enslave us, and they cause us limitless suffering. This we need to come to recognize, so as to give rise to a deep and stable determination to finally abandon them, and abandon them completely. To do so takes extensive effort over a protracted period of time. But by being diligent in applying ourselves to the antidotes, we will weaken and eventually eradicate the afflictions. But to do so, we must never tire from our endeavors, never feel overwhelmed, feel that it is too much, or as we saw in the verses last week, not become pessimistic or disheartened. We must not see this task as beyond us, but recognize it's entirely within our own capacity that we can gain freedom.
징하지 심주 매제바 장을 수수기를 녀모버 여바도 녀모버디네서 하고고 말에 진짜 녀모버 교인이 먼저 통고 말에 녀모버 교인 마통 와서 녀모버 빠야게 예 삼로 거야지 고고 말봐 진짜 녀모 빠야 삼먹어도 녀모버 녀버대하다 요 검자도 용고 말아 디네 자당 아주기 최년면가 역시 송도갑라 당 아주기를 녀모버디 ngotreche 녀모버디 아주기 자원원에 오마디 녀모버디레스 진짜 녀모버디 아주기 디나 뉴기마도 아니 판도에서 가야 말했어. 진짜 녀모바디 세야디 체대라 뉴기 기와 침발라 뉴기래 나솔레 마치게데 녀모바디 아주 코발레 드레제 타마두게제 파 송되겐데 녀모바디 송고래 세야디 더두시는 녀모바디 ngotreche 녀모비 귀엔디 파 ngotreche 더두시 ngotre고라 당아주 넘님 가르치었으나 나즈리 옆에는 미션다게 나코코가 뉴고래 고용한줄 뉴고래 고가주 좌고래서는 디바치 샨다디게 나즈리 미디 원줄에 뺏직 자고 쉬우지 괜 쉬우단 다도 콜마 자고로 코 매봐서요. 코좀 고래 코좀가 루고 세지. 되니기 그냥 파초되는 미 샘젠디게 자고 수술을 돼서 다음마tin 봐도 수술 말이 버전 디 자고를 쉬우지 될 마ten지 될 네버기야다 될 두시에 갑되줘야게 삼당마도 수수기기 녀모바들 삼당거 말해지. 지난 치 샘젠디게 수술을 네버 갑레라 네버기기래 이네 되는지다 자 라신게 자디 말해서 거 내가 비엔나 테베 긴기 되네게 가서래 미든 바강아데 용고레스 지사이 니 가브리엘 양아주기 땅지 델레 튠부전에 조고시고 차도 그랬어 지사 라신이 자이는 조고 차 투야면 그 쟤네 조고 차도 그랬어 쟤는 조고 차야 지사 내가 비엔나 내가 삼지게나 텐데 체디 잠기 체델라야다 내가 뒤치 가시지려 되는시 용그르마도 기디 나가서 저거 책이 말해서 아니 지사다 되네 가서 내가 가서 저거 치네 디기 내가 기변에 가서를 때 직강아 돼서 제도마도 기와치만 가서 취하다 녀와치에 동안 녀셔야지 디수기 제도 말해서 지사다 가서 기요 녀모 봐서야 되게 세델레이나 가서 동아티고라 라야 마치워서 샤야 마치워서 녀모 받으랬어 개와치만 가솔마 티제 냐왈 티겐데 녀몽바디 티고레스 녀외 둥아 빠도메 녀고지 녀몽바디 티고레스 녀몽바디 까디 콜리아 까지 녀몽바디 가서 당도len 제베네 괜지마다 까마도 대화나면 용수야 말스 그래서 녀몽바디 기디네 가서 조고 차토야 가야 말 소소를 여비기마도 판도 제투겐데 차기네요 말해서 당도 베진나라 이제 전주 나라야 손에도 이제 녀몽바들이 제자다 녀몽바 빠야려야 나중에 셈도 송고 셈디 아니 바유点셈 바유点셈 녀몽바 쳐서 마다와제 달바 송제 셈 개위 쳐서 다제 개와 강도 냠네 제오래서 이제 도나닝 보디 송고로 와당서
Until one hears the presentations of the Dharma and comes to understand them quite well, the reality is one doesn't even recognize our afflictions. Whilst they may so readily arise within us and may often be dominant within us, because we are so deeply habituated to our afflictions, we don't even notice their presence. And in fact, we often misapprehend them as being helpful, as being allies in the face of difficulties. This is deeply deluded. And to the extent we come to understand the Buddha Dharma, we come to recognize that it's these afflictions and these afflictions alone that are a real enemy. In fact, we come to finally recognize that the very meaning of Buddhist practice is just this, striving to eliminate the afflictions. So whether one is engaging in Buddhist practice or not is determined by whether one is striving to eradicate these afflictions or not. To be able to actually do so, to be committed in this journey of eradication, we need to recognize with vivid clarity just what the afflictions are, which is the cause of every problem and difficulty we have ever experienced. In fact, everyone that we care about, everyone we have ever cared about, suffers because of these afflictions. And this is the case in this life. It's been in the case in previous lives, whether as a human being or as in another realm. It's always these afflictions. This is all they do. All our problems, all our pain and misery is because of them. And this will remain the situation until we take care of our own mind, take charge of our own mind. So here, Shantideva guides us to recognize how we are habituated to placing the blame on external enemies, blaming other people or situations for our problems and difficulties. And this is part of the trick that the afflictions play on us. The afflictions deceive us. They afflict our mind. They distort our perception of reality, leading us to blame others, not the actual cause of our suffering, which lies within. Moreover, Shantideva guides us to recognize that in the same way that we shun external enemies, we do our best to avoid them, we do our best to eradicate them. And analogies are drawn to mind of warfare, where people engage in battle to try and destroy what they believe to be the source of pain and misery. Shantideva encourages us to recognize our true enemy and apply that level of vigor to our true enemy, to the afflictions that abide within. So this requires several steps. Firstly, recognizing who our enemies are and gaining conviction that it's them and them alone that cause suffering, and then developing skill in applying antidotes to eradicate them. And this too takes time, because these afflictions have as their very nature that they deceive us. They cause us to suffer, but they don't necessarily appear as enemies. They all too often appear as our friends. But the truth is, an external person, a person other than ourselves who does give us a hard time, maybe berates us, maybe takes advantage of us, belittles us, whatever the case may be, in their nature, they are not our enemy. They too, just like us, want to be happy. They want to be liked, they want to be respected, they want to be in harmony with others, even whilst harming us. Understanding this point, we then can come to recognize that by showing kindness, interacting with fairness to others, we can change our relationship with them. And this you'll have experience of in your own life. People that you really did not get on with. Over time, that relationship changed. So we can come to recognize that even people that at one point we despise, that relationship can be changed, because in their nature, they are not our enemy. But our afflictions, in their nature, they do only harm. Unlike an external enemy, an internal enemy, if we indulge them, they just take greater advantage of us. They deceive us ever more. They become more ferocious. And in return for the favor we show our own afflictions, the indulgence we show our own afflictions, they harm us even more intensely. So Shantideva here, in the Bodhisattva's way of life, he makes it very clear to us that we need to recognize who our true enemies are and stop laying the blame at external situation and people, but solely at our own afflictions, and then strive to eradicate them, first weaken them, and eventually eradicate them through cultivating virtue, cultivating virtuous minds, minds which are contrary to the afflictions. So continuing in this theme, looking at the afflictions, we now come to the 39th verse in the 4th chapter. If wounds inflicted by enemies for no great purpose are held up as ornaments on the body, then when striving to fulfill a genuine great purpose, for what reason should harm done cause me suffering?
donda chenpo meba, don mesu donda chenpo meba, donda chuchu se dizamji, da ganga seya tablabna, sosu digiru tablamlia, ane go ngansu pugiti ngansu jawore, sen ngansu chik delva, chik ma jaya dan, zingya dan, dene chigoro wasirwa, dene chidu kabla, ane dene chidu kabla da, ngansu jidu, ane jawo shandagi, da pacho ngansu jawa da digi jawo di ngansu liya, ane chuen jawa dan, dene chik chidu kabla lupolo ya, 마차야 다 직되게 마차 되네 면다로 포하지 마차야 집 포하지 마차 중고로 와 지선 되면 저유 마술 되나 양스 되네 마차와 중고로 와서 거다 배당 보지시 된다지.
Looking at the first two lines together, these present an illustration. If wounds inflicted by enemies for no great purpose are held up as ornaments on the body. So here, we can look at this in a very broad way, and then take the specific illustration. So the efforts we go to overcome this life's problems and difficulties, we go to these efforts because we see these problems as having a magnitude which in reality they just do not possess. When we look at each of the problems and traumas that we've experienced in our life, looking at it from the perspective of the great expanse of lifetimes that we have, each of these passing problems is trivial, is in reality of no real importance. But because of not having a broader perspective, we relate to these problems in a way that is completely deluded. And due to this, we may end a relationship with someone. We may engage in violence with someone or engage in warfare with others. And in this way, we come to cause great harm, thinking we are somehow doing something of importance, something of value. But in reality, it is for no great purpose.
Denige deme je masudena ya denige jawo denige jingbi kable jawo ge sosole chen zu chen yapje susu ma dyobaina ani lula jana jawar ne selje na sido oda denige meshu di masu jige be sosugi janda ba na shinchina bawochina odnyama ma banyaje nyama anjige seche na sido denige dapo nyawa siwo dapo je anjine ge sosugi bawora chene nyama nga Tele Maja and then Masugureta, and Meshiki Pap, Shelia, Momiada, then the power she go to us, then she go to Ejere, Rida Jena to ourselves in us.
The illustration is made clear. Wounds inflicted by enemies for no great purpose are held up as ornaments on the body. So here we can think of soldiers returning from battle, recounting stories of their great bravery. And they will, and perhaps in other circumstances one can, that we are more familiar with, talk about what someone said to us, how they wronged us, but what we said in return. And in this way, we hold up our wounds as ornaments, as if we've achieved something of significance.
Dunda chenpo meba dunda chuchu tse dizam yi dunga seya dan sosugi digi duya dezam yi ane chik ya gangan kido suni sosugi so chasan luya dan che shen liya zingya dan ma jia zhochu dus zhugor was chesan dini ge gangan digi pa jipa kido suya shen zhugor was dini zhuwa ne ane diyan chik sosugi shengi ma shiwa che su lobe na shengi ane luya sosugi ya chun ji yapje ma sökyo de dining ma shurup jewe na di gen na shi be de ko pobore che ne a da nga ma ja ru de ma dine ma ja ru di ma je ne di an me shuru da ma dine söware da sa de so sugi pobore che ne power ka so nga je che du che ji gi du was che san di ji da nga ji den ba na dine yong go ro was or de pe ro sung go wan.
This is something all too common, that we encounter hardships and we respond in an aggressive manner, and then later we brag to others about how brave we were, how we stood up for ourselves. And the event that we are recounting, again, when looked at with a broader perspective, is of something of no significance, no real value. And if this is an account of physical bravery or physical violence, we brag about how we stood up for ourselves and engaged in violence. And we recount stories of our bravery with this puffed up sense of pride, this puffed up sense of having accomplished something. Whereas when looked at with eyes of wisdom, we recognize how foolish this is.
Dunshin Drupchir Yanda Tunjur Bas, Dunshin said that Sanji Homas, Sim Yomon Bege, Jiba Pacha, the Jepa Bambi, Bangba, Jibambi Yunde. They share them Jonsum no Doba, Tarachin be Ishi, 캔 아니 데니게 빵도 유연데 데니게 템바 유연데다 고방 톱에 산지위티 다 된첨보레스 이 된첨보이 미김자가라서는 라니 유기 유념뭐 바샤다지 바빵 아니 시시 유연된 차상 캠바데 딜을 하바지 다 메르바다 나는 주기 디기세데 녀모 바샤다지 바빵나 아니 제 녀모베 강함에 디기 풍소 소보주야 쉐담 정원수도 봐또봐 탈침바 있나 땀마시바 어딘게 신분들 간에나서 베드네 강함에 제삼 녀모 바샤다지 바빵바이나 녀모 엉게랑이야 안 강아요 유님에 시시 윤제 시자 탐제 원숨도 봐 탈침바 인바나 마기바 어딘게 신분들 간에나서 네 강아가야메 제사데 빵도 윤제 탈침바디 된침보레스 된치쇼 딜레 라바죠 말레스 된치 제가 디 된첨보 데니게 빵도 윤된 타르침비게 상기요 고방디 소수규를 두비 칠도서 줍칠서 소소기디 두비 칠도 나 냠는 람 냠는디 제바디 안에 배수전에 제고래 사치 승월 줍심 된친 줍칠서 양다 전부 교르셔야 돼 대토비 칠도 다 라니 된첨보 빵도 윤대 탈침바 상기요 고방 된첨보디 랑니 유를 두비 칠도 대톱직에 탑람 되게 냠는 배수전에 공고래 존주시는 냠는 제고래 사치 된진 줍칠 양다 전주 바세
And the third line, then when striving to fulfill a genuine great purpose. So what is a genuine great purpose? It refers to the greatest of purposes, that is the attainment of Buddhahood. The attainment of Buddhahood which comes about through the union of bodhicitta and the wisdom directly realizing emptiness. So if we are striving to cultivate these two remarkable qualities of bodhicitta and the wisdom realizing emptiness, this means we are striving for the greatest of purposes. Because it's through cultivating wisdom as well as other good qualities that we first weaken, and eventually through wisdom in particular, we will come to eradicate the afflictions together with their seeds. And when that wisdom is conjoined with bodhicitta, we'll even eradicate the stains of the afflictions. This means our mind will become completely pure of any trace of affliction, any trace of flaw. And all our good qualities will shine through in a perfected way. This means everything is known. Nothing is obscure to the omniscient mind. That means one can never be deceived. One can only be of benefit. One will always be of benefit, rather, because one's advice, one's guidance will always be faultless. One will be able to guide others perfectly in accordance with their own needs and dispositions. This is the attainment of the greatest purpose, and that is something worth striving for.
lam yang daba gomgore esede ta lam yang da sede jeza lam yang daba manowa machuba chene gomgore made ani ji deni yakpo deni yang daba ma gombaina ani denchi ma sanyo ko badu sanyo ko phadi tuk ma de seorwa ta yang daba de kare lam yang daba gomege lam yang daba se de kare la da 안 주게 semjan tamje 대화다 되나 sembe 니제 곰 semjan tamje 동안다 자와 가서 semje 대화다 되나 님비게 잠바 곰 얘네 semjan 동안다 자와도 비 니제 곰 얘네 semjan tamje 대화다 된바다 동안다 자와다 녜지기 semjan tamje 산지고 방 녜 꾸긴 sem비게 하사 남다게 얘네 녜 semjan tam지게 되는 산지고 방 토르쇼 sem비게 장주 sem게네 다 장주 sem기 꾸네 랑비 통 꾸네 라네 다 진배 냠나지야 수련념내자, 수배념내자, 존재념내, 삼대 셰르념내자, 파신주기념내자, 다디 산지고 뭐 된첨보도 두비 치도 람 양다바디레서 다디 되네게 양다바디 안나 배주의 제시 아니 존재시는 념내자 고래서 공고래서 그다 존줄 봐서
The genuine great purpose refers to the attainment of Buddhahood. And to attain this perfected state of Buddhahood, one needs to cultivate the complete and unmistaken paths in one's own continuum. And to cultivate such paths, one requires an exceptional motivation. A motivation that comes about, firstly, through understanding one's own mind well, and thereby, having developed definite emergence, applying one's understanding of oneself to others, developing a deep wish that in the same way as I want to be free of suffering, so too do others. May we all gain freedom from suffering and its causes. And this way we generate genuine compassion. Moreover, one reflects that in the same way that I want to abide in lasting, stable happiness, so too do all others. May all beings abide in lasting, stable happiness. In this way we generate love. And having generated both genuine love, genuine compassion, we develop this further to the point where we are no longer satisfied with this mere expression of yearning, but we want to bring this yearning into reality. And this is where we take the to generate the wholehearted resolve, the altruistic attitude, where we take responsibility for others, where we say to ourselves, I make the commitment that I will help others achieve a state of lasting happiness. In other words, to fulfill this aspiration of love. I take responsibility for others to ensure that they are skillfully guided to attain freedom from suffering. In other words, that this motivation of compassion, I will fulfill it. This love and compassion within me, it will not be a mere expression of hope, but I will bring it into reality. But to do so, I have to be the most skilled of guides. I have to become a Buddha. Therefore, so that I can be of greatest benefit to others, I will strive to become a Buddha. And this is where one generates bodhicitta. And to fulfill this aspiration of bodhicitta, one needs to engage in the practices of a bodhisattva, the 6 perfections. Engage in developing a generous spirit, develop a mind that is ethical, that is restrained from the afflictions, develop a sincere patience based in love, compassion, and wisdom, as well as enthusiastic perseverance and concentration and wisdom. This is the kind of path that needs to be cultivated within in order to attain the perfected state of Buddhahood.
And that's in your past, on those in that, the Negi, Lamyanda, Manoa, Matuba, and Chasanwaji do, in Besuche, Junduche, Yamle Javaina, and then Duen Chimbo, and then Tartuin, Dona Tartuba, San Yokopati, Dushin Tokores, Sungorwa.
With such a motivation, then, to achieve a genuine great purpose, one then sets about with a wholehearted resolve and determination. I will achieve this goal for the sake of others. Nothing will hold me back.
Dala Dunga Chichir Neji in Sida, Jeza, Dendegi, Danganzuke, Sanjo Gomo Tobi Chido, Lam, Yamnin Jebi, Gabla, and Dala, Sanat Yamne Chidu, and then Ganga Yonsivares, or depending on Zuke, Dayanjik, Sayatuya, Twinkin Tona, Ganga, and then the Chapi Ganga, that door, Jickas, Yan Sawazi, outside Yan Sawazi Ganga, and Denegi Ganga, Denegi Dusene, Yungri, Yonsivare, Yungres, Gesi, Deni Yombana, Denegi Ganga delia, Jichir, Neji in Sidida, Denegi Ganga de Ganga Dandu Lenche, Sosuki, Dunga, Denegi Ganga de Dandu Le, Ajik Sene, Sevache. Dunga Dandu Limbe Sevasa, Chegruachizan, Denigi Ganga, all that Denigi Dandu Le, Sevache, Sevacomche, Yamlin Jeshavina, Denigi Ganga digi, Susule, Nugmare, Nujimar, Ganga, Nugmares, Carson, Digi, Susuki, Yamlin Yagedo, Company Drobal, Pengris, or the Pengris, Cesar Dene, Dunga Dandu Limba, Sevacomiodu, Denigi Ganga de Tavina, Ganga digi, Lam Yamli, Yagio Company Drobal, Pengri Mato, Nugmares. Jeza Dala, Dunga, Jichir, Nuji, Nuja can check, Nuji, Nuji, Mares, Nuji, Delia, and this server company, Nuja checking my Delia, Pember to watch, Pem, because Yamin Yagido, or competitor, Pingris or that.
here one needs to be realistic that the attainment of such a genuine great purpose doesn't come about overnight. It doesn't come about through mere aspiration or sporadic effort, but takes concerted effort for lifetimes. Therefore, one will experience challenges. So one here then makes a determination to be skillful and to embrace all that arises before one as opportunities, committing to take them into the path, to aid our spiritual development in order to be of ever greater benefit to others. In other words, every situation that others would consider to be a problem, a suffering, or a difficulty, one will embrace it, knowing that they are developing one's own strength of mind and a skillful mind. In this way, the fourth line, for what reason should harm done cause me suffering? So here one is being clear-eyed that I will experience many hardships. Maybe they're clearly temporary, such as the weather. Maybe they are about having financial insecurity. Maybe about having insufficient material resources. So in this way, I may experience real hardship. But with these or whatever other circumstances I encounter, I will forbear with them. I'll be patient with them. And I'll have an attitude that does not experience a problem as a problem, suffering as a suffering, as a difficulty as a difficulty. But rather, I will embrace all such encounters, taking them onto the path, and thereby utilizing them to strengthen my resolve, my determination, to radically transform my mind, knowing that in this way, I increase my skill and my capacity to be of benefit to others. And this way, I develop a genuine path within, bringing about the closer attainment of the great purpose of enlightenment.
Dela soyo komna nuje chaya mi doa, jisa karachin deniga kanga chewe ne, ane dela soyo nyamla jina karas nuje chaya mara, dela soyo nyamla chesheba ne, pengi resi, pendoa chadu, penba dhru tuku resi achi, disungurwa. Dakazu penba dhru tuku resi adi, ji shir se yumsen, karachin dunga deni chung jile edu, karachin ngala ya, deni nuje chaya resi, nuba chaya, nuje ma, dela dangdu lenje, kol ya, nane, jige, And
this is shown in this expression, for what reason? So this is the kind of attitude that the practitioner takes, that all that they encounter, so what others would consider to be problems, sufferings, and difficulties, for what reason should these overwhelm me? For what reason should these be too much for me to bear? Rather, I will embrace them all as opportunities to develop my skill. This is the type of resolve that one needs to cultivate to achieve a genuine great purpose.
Pa desulya ani kaso kedu suechene pa zingal ma ja dorwa jesan denigi donda chungchung jiglia denigi kanga sosola sola nyanga yube kanga denisi kedu sueche ani pa zingal dotuguyena tuguyo baina dene sosuge korwe dunga tada de joje rangi donda chenpo shiwoche gyön tamjedan je sangyo kobang toba dile laba jeba di tobe chedu dunga dene chungchung jigli kedu sueche nyamne che tuguru wase gorda donda disungurwa je wase.
In our world, people have a very narrow-minded approach because they take this life as being the totality of what there is to be experienced and successes within which to experience. So therefore, problems, sufferings, and difficulties are seen as such. And therefore, people respond to unwanted circumstances in this exaggerated way that leads to conflict and violence and warfare. But for someone who has genuinely set their heart on Buddhahood, that is their goal. All these other experiences are insignificant. They are minor. They do not even trouble one. So in this way, they are able to skillfully relate to what others would consider to be hardships in a positive light, recognizing that by transforming them, there is benefit to these encounters, in that it leads to their ever developing a spiritual skill.
먼저 윤회 되디 니메치 칼라세교 말와 칼라세교 뭐 주둥고 말와 지산 갖고미야다 지 조도야기 강아 여러바다 이내 디가 저기 니 디비컬 디강아 섬고 말 그때 찍고 당도 렌체 디링이 개와 주야다 데니기 지 디봉게로 개와사에게 냠는지에게 된다라 섬다시 두시네 디스 차산에 케도 수여시네 바 델야 수여시네 아니 지 냠는지고로 바다 지산 데니기 제어도 갑라 아니 데니기 제비 갑라 삼나다 타올이야 아직 데니기 이 제금 동아디기 뇨아디기 셈제 탐지기 아니 냐마 코와 토만에 다데바도 사제비기다 제금 동아 용과야 되게 동아디기 다버쇼 셈비게 삼다야나 아니 제 지기 이다이 끼월에 데니기 레사바네 레디게 다버쇼 셈비 제 데니지 다시 냠제 삼다네 셴 셈제 데니기 아니 제금 동아 뇨도 바디게 데니 데니기 디린 동아 데니기 강아 체베디게 다시 셴기 셴심제 탐지 제금 동아디 민용와 쇼스 뇨미고 용와 쇼스 비 삼다 두스지 제사된 윤에 되베갑이야 소수의 카콤비게 강아지다 저것도베 강아 용거때 이나디 체도 수에제 동아 당도 렌지 당도 렌지 지 계주 주묘도 강아 섬고 막 강아 튀고 말어 제사 어디니게 냠는 제샤반 제사디 냠는 디게 소수기 베 개왕함에 랭아 바사시베 다야당 안지기 셴기 요새 냠다시 냠지게 삼다 도시 냠제 냠리게 계주를 빼마세 이게 니버처럼 편도 연구로 와서 이 제산 되네자 누가 다들래 봐야 돼. 내제 가는 책을 세야 두시는 삼다는 아주 하고 두야 작으로 와다.
I imagine many of you have engaged in the practice of nyungnes. And there, as you know, for in each nyungne, there's a day in which one does not eat or even drink anything. So generally, if one were to think about an entire day that one does not eat or drink at all, one would see that as deeply undesirable and do whatever one could to avoid that. No one would willingly choose it. But when skillfully engaging in a practice such as nyungne, a fasting practice such as nyungne, because of a different attitude, that same situation is embraced. One recognizes that because of the motivation I've cultivated in this morning session and that I'm maintaining dominance in my mind throughout the day, I am accumulating extensive virtue and purifying past non-virtue. In this way, one embraces this experience of a dry mouth and an empty belly, transforming this experience into the path. So this then is a skillful approach by which one embraces what one encounters, not experiencing it as a suffering, but as an opportunity to purify, bearing in mind that all suffering that beings experience comes from causes. So all the suffering that of hunger and thirst that humans and even spirits, such as pretas, experience, comes about from non-virtuous causes. By cultivating now this virtuous motivation and dedicating it to the purification of such causes for myself and others, we will gain freedom from experiencing that. This then brings joy to one's mind, knowing that through this experience that I'm transforming in this way, that I'm not experiencing in this exaggerated negative way, I'm purifying and I'm accumulating virtue. This means we experience something in a vastly different way than we otherwise would because of our way of thinking. And the outcome is we accumulate, we purify, but we are also strengthening our resolve through recognizing that our growing spiritual skill, our capacity to deal with things that would otherwise be challenging.
and nebala jimeni bigi sube nyamle nebala jimeni base jimeni be no jimeni sube nyamle jene jesa denigi chele chu nebachi de dungal jehan gangan ji tong ji che ji jumbai na dele ya an haba do jehe sebati be ningji gom ningje da je ningje sa ningji gom ya da ningji gom je denigi sosuge gangan de nebaki de sosu dungal je de sosuge sube nyamle je dunga dangdo lembe seba neba le jimeni be seba kom an shen neba chigen de pa niji kom tu kuje nyamnen cheo de kabla jesa denigi dunga digi an sosolya dunga yungu orde ina dunga digi sosolya gewe nyamnen chewalya ji nyamnen ji sanje ko to bol be nyurdu ta da pe ji du shine pembe tugo pembe mo tugo ra jesa dineza kanga an kasole lamdo longwa se chegro kanga chebare de kanga di ya sanju gomo to ki lamdo kyuwa kanga lamdo kyuwa se lushine chegro jiza jin sympathetic nyamne du nangora dine sa jiza dala dunga ji ji ne ji mi se jiza dine dunga che kare ne je chegre nyamne jeba delya rangle 판도 ba tarba da 탐지 김고 고바 to 그 탐지 김고 고바 to 기 뉴도 to 기 판도 펜버 주게는 판 튕긴 차로 거래 세지 데네게 삼다데 donde yudu chikti doina samtadu anu jige denige sebe nyamlen chedang tone andu chen samtayo ba ta nyuni kabla ya denige du chen nyamlen chedi kabla samtayo ba denige du chen yumje mangbo sam denige chiktang du denige da dunga jebe ina du chen sosuge da kanga me ba ani deso ne jige tarba sangi goba tubege lam nyamlen liya gyurtu ba ani kanga lamdu kherwa saji an dunga lamdo kyawa sade duchen ji tuor wade duchen nyamnan je ore se orde
To become a bodhisattva, one needs to train one's mind extensively over a great period of time. But when one is an actual bodhisattva, one is a radically transformed being, quite apart from us ordinary people. When a bodhisattva receives harm, when they're on the receiving end of harm from others, whether it's verbal or even physical, their natural response is completely different from our own. When someone harms us, again, physically or verbally, our immediate response is, I am being harmed. I need to protect myself. There's this feeling of protecting oneself and poor me, I am being harmed. This is our natural response. But a bodhisattva, their natural response, what spontaneously arises within them, is love and compassion. In other words, when someone harms a bodhisattva, their natural response is not, oh, poor me, but my poor suffering mother of old. Immediately their heart opens to this being before them. So when harsh words or violence is inflicted on a bodhisattva, their first concern is not about themselves, but about the being before them. So in this way, they can readily respond in a skillful manner to ease the suffering of this kind and precious being before them. So this is how an actual bodhisattva encounters or engages in such circumstances. This is an actual example of where a problem or a difficulty is transformed into the path to enlightenment. Because what in other circumstances for an ordinary person such as ourselves, that same situation would lead to afflictions arising and thereby recreating causes to perpetuate our samsara. For a bodhisattva encountering that identical situation, their natural response is creating virtue, creating causes that lead to enlightenment. This is how problems are transformed into the path to enlightenment. So a situation, a circumstance that would otherwise be unfavorable gets transformed into a favorable circumstance. So through applying ourselves repeatedly over an extensive period in mind training techniques, in practices such as Nyungnes, in training in the causes that will lead to bodhicitta, we become skilled like a bodhisattva. And for a bodhisattva, there are no circumstances that are unfavorable or harmful to them. All such circumstances, a skilled bodhisattva effectively deals with, and that deals with them in a way that they become causes for enlightenment.
simbi toane kune lanche pajin chugi nyamlen chebale tene ne sangki zunru nyamlen cheche na sangke bares tene ge kanga thiru kapli ya an dunga danglen chigi sebe nyamlen cheche dushine an dunga an de lamdo kherchine dushine sangye nyamlen che nang sangke bares na daja janju semba dige ne ya samjen tamjigi kasore duen chimba sangyo ko ba tobe chiru ne 정유심 유군야나데 파진주기 아니 남야다고 파진주기 냠네 준주 전에 배치지 곰 아니 지게 내내게 강아 동아 체력가 동아 당랭기 쇠바당 아니 도시네 세베 냠네 도시네 냠네진 냠네 지고레스 지데 동아 람도 유도시는 거레스 아데니 다 숨바딩 알아줄이야 다 제사 조 알아줄이야다 결혼이나 심제 가서 코르녀 된 첨부 탈도 상지 고방데 톱고월에 세단디 톱이 치르도다 가르치 왔으면 디 톱에게 된다라 남냠는 자주심 요구냐 나제 구심비터네 팔진주게 냠는제 데 배주제 준주제 냠는 제고레스 데네게 냠는 제베 갑리야 소소 강아 가데 체베네 강아들이야 동ren제 쇠보검 안지게 현기자를 녀버치기나 데리야 네 지게 동하 녀발에 지면이베 쇠보검 랑기 데니 집이가라 소소야 강아 체베네 데네게 한 동안 당도레베 쇠보검제 무두스 냠는지 배주지 공고레스 준주시는 냠는 제고레스 데네게 제도제네 데네엔자 제바이나 아니 상계다 저주sem바 냠는 나제 두셰바 나신 두시용 투리에서 된 것을야 탈도 된 것을 납자루지 디송고레
So to combine then the meaning of this verse with what we've been looking at over the last many weeks, so we remind ourselves that Buddha Shakyamuni and all the great practitioners of the past were once ordinary beings no different from any of us, but in dependence on hearing a teaching such as this, conjoined with all the other causes accumulated prior to that, they made the firm decision to set aside the concerns of that life, set aside the striving for that life's pleasures and overcoming that life's problems, and rather they made a firm determination to become a bodhisattva. And to become a bodhisattva, they strove in the various meditations required to become a bodhisattva, as well as the practices of the bodhisattva, the 6 perfections. And by doing so, they eventually became whichever of the great practitioners of the past, such as the Buddha or any of the others, that they became. So we should follow their example, recognize that they have been recorded in history to act as inspiration for later generations of students such as ourselves. So we too then should strive to cultivate the causes to become bodhisattvas, as well as to cultivate the 6 perfections. And then to join this with where we are in the text, to aid our cultivation of the causes of bodhicitta and the perfections, we need to recognize that our sole enemy is our own afflictions. Every pain and difficulty we have ever experienced and will ever experience is solely due to our afflictions. Therefore, when others act towards us in an unkind manner or an unskillful manner, if we have trained well in just recognizing that the source of all our suffering is our own afflictions, what we'll watch out for is that we don't give rise to the afflictions when others speak to us or act towards us in an unkind manner. And then we'll have the space, the mental space, to respond with skill, with kindness, with wisdom, with care. So in this way, these teachings aid us in becoming a mature practitioner, a practitioner who has a genuine great goal in mind, not merely the pleasures of this life. With the same outlines, Shantideva now presents an additional illustration. So the meaning is the same, but it's a different example. When farmers and those doing the lowest forms of work, such as fishers, motivated just for their own livelihood, endure harm such as heat and cold, how can I not forbear for the sake of the happiness of migrators?
dulo la soba so ko yeje tuya la soba denigi jige setism ji dunga se digi tuya dala ane nya sim nya so duschene nya ko chongche bala soba da dolba se de dine shenba sha so bala soba denigi ane setism ji dunga se ya ge digi tuya ge dala ane semchen so je ba semchen pa de semchen so je duchen sha chong ala soba le ge je ba ane Hingba said that I said this Dunha said and Digitualia, Sosuki Shinga Taptundo Taptelia, and Chikidushin, Tapchelian, Dushin, Setism, Dunha say and Digituagi, Tablam Liada, Nyabata, Dobata, Shimbala Soba, Deneki, Yorwas, or that is Pero Sungorba.
Maybe going through the order that we have in the English. So when farmers we call to mind, especially those at the time when this was written, well more than 1,000 years ago. Working as a farmer was hard work. You really worked with your hands outside in the elements, whatever they may have been. There wasn't much in the way of machinery 1,400 years ago. So the work of a farmer meant enduring great physical hardship. Why? So as to achieve the happiness of this one life. Others, so as to achieve happiness in this life, to have sufficient funds to feed themselves, their families, to be able to house themselves, clothe themselves, would engage in forms of labor that would be considered, as we have here, the lowest forms of work. So this would be working, so this is a cultural thing, but it would be things that at the time would have been considered the lowest forms of work, such as butchers or hunters. And then the other illustration of fishers. So this refers to people who engage in work that is socially unacceptable, which at that time was work that involved killing. So here you had people who wanted to be happy, who wanted to be free of problems and difficulties, and to do so, they engaged in work that ensured the accumulation of extensive non-virtue, thinking that somehow this would bring them happiness. So these are the illustrations presented in the first line.
Nyabado Bashimba La Sofa Tessigne, Desuge. That the ne, the Carigenici or Sena Rangi, Soa Zamshi, Sembaya, Sosugi, Soa Chetism, Yetsegi, Digituada, Soa Zumgi, Chedu, and Duchigores. That the ne Chebi Cablia, Anne, Lega Levi Cabliada, Legat Ganga Dunglin Jewa Carcariosene, Jezada, Be Cabrilla, Janvi Dunga, Jangwa, Janvi Dunga Yer, 안에 차유 동아 데니가 지금 소라 년아 데니가 요 셴리 랑이 루소라 나자 다야 데니가 뇌바 칸의 쉬베네 디셔산 뇌바디게 뇌지디 바 쇠체네 케도 쇠체네 데 레갈 두신 레고레 해지리다 차나장라 소비기 뇌쇠나스.
The second line makes clear their motivation. So their motivation was focused on just this life, focused on having sufficient funds, having a livelihood, sufficient funds to overcome this life's problems, as well as to experience some pleasures in this life. But their focus was just on this brief, fleeting life. But to experience these transitory pleasures and overcome brief problems, they endured, the third line, such hardships such as those related to working outdoors. So this is what people endure, just to have some temporary pleasures and overcome insignificant problems.
나도나라 냐베디게 냐주 심 지게 총야 강한 냐주 강한 제어와디 donda디 가르치레스네 소수기 최위 튕기기 don다르레스 제사 처음에나 시루고와 동아지 강아지고로 제사 강아세야다 최위 튕기지들이 다 도바샤발로 셴발로서바데 데니기샤 데니기 데야다 샤존야로 소바제디야 소수기 최위 튕기기 don다지고레스 네 신바 신가 다야 가시기 신비기 다 라소바 신가 답제 레갈한디게 네네 다 소소 최위 튕기는 지고레스 나 속나라야 망무용으로와 아주 구마구가 제서 소유 튕기도 나 구마구로 소소가 강아지 벤저 구고를 벤제메도 탑신메도 구마구야래 셴이 초야 초점지야 차사 근데 내기 소유 튕기도네 지고로와 안디로와 되네 디멘베게 당어서 내가 가르나 제모쟁에 샤브로 탑관에 시에 당아래 되네기 안 도시면지나 차사 소수기 소유 튕기도 달라 레갈리고로 와다 레가 릭마 소유 튕긴 지두비알이야 근데 내가 직자 말아나서 여들어와다 제가 자산당 주기 데니체인데 자산 소유 튕기도 달라 차도로 와지오라 소유 튕기 지고래서 너나들이 다 데니 제비 갑라네 가리용 강아를 냠 강아 동는 제거하되 가서 장모 차야다 차와치야다 수볼라 강아체야 나자다야 솔로 년하게 네가 빠도메바 용고르데 디스 차산 파케도 세네 수에진 내가 레고 거스 디말레바네 신바디 예강아도 어다 차와치도 레글레기 메랍나 돈도라기 말와 장모도 레글레기 메네 돈도라요 말와 제사 디니기 티 데스 동아 케도 수에제 소수기 최비 튕긴디 주비에게 돈다라 안 차와다 장와다 류라 강아다 신기 녀바다 베직 가르쉐베네 녀바디게 파스에진 케도 수에진네 레글레고도 와서다 디 레글레야디 돈다디 체디점기 랑게 최비 튕긴 디점기 돈달마도 지고로 와서 되니게 이내 되니게 강아디 케도 수엔 지고로 와서
the illustration is presented in these first three lines. So we can take the traditional examples here of people who endure great hardships, just hardships of, say, fishing out on a lake or the ocean, or hunting in forests, or killing in an abattoir. So they endure these hardships, accumulating causes for intense suffering in the future. And why? Just to have some temporary pleasures in this life and overcome the minor problems and difficulties of this life. And of course, it's the same for others, those who steal, or the fraudsters who deceive. But perhaps where we can see this more clearly in our modern context is with people who strive to become someone famous through athletics or their various sporting professions. They endure tremendous hardships to become elite in their field. They train every day, no matter what the weather. So in the ancient times, as referred to here, farmers had to go out, or fishers had to go out, no matter the weather. This certainly is the case for athletes today. If the weather's bad, it doesn't mean they don't train. If it's hot, they just run in the sun. If it's icy cold, they run in the icy cold. They train like this. And for what? For no greater purpose than the farmers and fishers of old. They do so for the pleasures of this life. They do so as to have fewer problems but still only of this life. So this is the key point being made in these three lines, that all these endeavors and hardships people endure are solely for the purpose of this life.
Andinari la sopana le anzu chushe chengele yongsi gwa je sosugi kunolia ani sosugi chue tingyun duya soso tamnyanda yongya denegi da sosugi chedi zamgi soso tamnyanda yongya soso mingchenbo chaya soso lia tingin yaburaya ya sam kunlo deni thone chushe bainene da de chedi zamgi sam chasong rwada jizanda kunlo delia yang ji deni memba che 아니 지게 샘지야 탐제라 펜베다랑 마 최세 현리야 펜베 삼다 탈바 탐제 김보 고바 토야다 전주 샘유군의 현리 펜베 좀 다지 도시네 체디기 담년달을 원도 마송와 좀 마다와치 현리 펜베 바시 삼다지 마 최세 제베나 다디 체디 잠기 디기두비아치도 차교 말에 있는 군원들 체 현리 펜바다 탈바 탐제 김보 고바 토비치도 최고래 이나디 쇼르야다 네셰셰 호랑 지제 호랑이야 안지미 튕게다 지게 안지 약부 중원에 담냐라 요아지 고 쇼르리고 마도 군로래 딘데 용고 말바다 딘디 섬담다 디 약고와 고야 딩아 주제데 디 고고와 딘디 고고와 제자 딘이 매바제 소수게 담년다 소수게 튕겐 두비야 딘이 군로 섬다 지셰베네 디지냐바 도바 심바 라소바스 라소티나나 취디게 차고로.
So in the first line, there's the term such as. So this is also often expressed as and so forth or etc. So this implies that Shantideva is saying to us, think about this broadly. Come to see how it's relevant in your own life. So let's take the illustration of spiritual teachers. Spiritual teachers should have a pure motivation. A motivation where they are genuinely wanting to be of benefit, genuinely wanting their students to grow spiritually and themselves to grow spiritually so they can be of ever more benefit. But it's all too easy to be in a position where what you have as your business opportunity is the capacity to teach. Then one's motivation may well be rather mundane, wanting a good reputation, to be liked by others, wanting to receive material reward, to live in comfortable circumstances. So the very common motivation in our world, that can be the motivation of someone who's acting the role of a spiritual teacher. And what's so sad with being in such a position is that of course, they will not achieve what they profess to want to achieve because their motivation is not such that they'll be accumulating causes that will lead to spiritual development. So that's quite clear. But because their motivation is so worldly or so ordinary, just like ordinary people in the world, all that they do achieve will leave them dissatisfied. It will not fulfill them because by its very nature, it cannot. So even whatever mundane success they achieve in the world, such as fame and recognition and comfortable material sources, it still will not leave them satisfied because such rewards can never satiate one. This is what happens for anyone who engages in their profession with an ordinary, mundane attitude.
Deneki nyamlen deneki semja tham jo khoi dunga le dreje sangye gobo thowa dile donda che ji yo mares jesan dile phando che wa yo mares ro deji ro semja thamji khoi gyen thada le dreje tingye dawa sangye gobo thoya de dile dewa che wa ji dan phando che wa ji me mares jesan di thobi che do da ge ji me se 다게 냠네 제발 양이 강아시네 강아디게 가르치네 쇠두고 말했어. 이미지 강아 쇠두고 그랬어. 진짜 쇠비 쇠지는 한 잘래 냠는 제고래 해서 올다지 도시나 삼다제. 진짜 저와 심지어 탐지 고위 균 바샤다 제발 되제 탈두게 되와 산지 고봉 토비에게 된다려야 니 남냠는 체디 강아 차베네 가세 강아 되네 강아 쇠두고레스 가르치는 쇠두고 말 쇠두고레스 대 쇠변냠는 체 진네 검투 냠는 체 두고레 제오레스 베나 데니기 체지점기 안내지게 최유 투긴 된다라 냐바도바 신발라서 차라라서 강아 가세나 간에 쇠시네 이거 지도와 디마제베는 체디점이 디 투투고 말와서 디나신 데니 쇠두고 나게 된 첨부 심전 탐지 거기 동화 타다 저제 띵이 되와 산요 고바 투비 치도 치등이 곰냠는 제와데 지디급라 강아연네 칼신 쇠투 말에 쇠투불이야 사실 두신의 삼다진에 냠는 배제신의 냠는 제고래서 그러다.
Now we come to the conclusion of the 40th verse. And the meaning is the same as the previous verse, where we challenge the way we relate to hardships, to see them in a positive light, give us a strength, a determination within. So for ourselves, as people who have a wish to achieve a genuine great purpose, in other words, Buddhahood for the sake of others, we have ourselves set on the attainment of the greatest of all goals. There is nothing greater that anyone could hope for than that. So if I have such a motivation, then surely all the hardships that I encounter, that I can deal with those, I can endure them because of the greatness of the goal. Because here the comparison is with ordinary people who are striving for the most ordinary of goals. They endure really quite tremendous hardships. So myself, who's striving for the sake of each and every dear mother sentient being, how can I not forbear the hardships and difficulties that I will encounter? One here commits to dealing with difficulties with patience, knowing that they are useful and the purpose of what we are doing is great. This then gives us the strength of mind required.
Dishi yanza tsik tangpo dila duanchin drupchir yangda zunpa gyuru sede, digi tsik digi duanchin sede, rangi simjian tamjige duandala ya sanji, rangi sanji kubwa toba la, lam yangda zunpa besu shina nyamne che hore, ganga tiri kable suebe nyamne chi nyamne che hore saji, rangi liba. Rangi gi duanchin pa sanji kubwa toba ya la jar. Dan dadi nipa zhuwa dichir, zhuwa dichir dada jimizu sayadi, rāñī sāñyā gōpa tūchī chīrū māyīn bācī, simchān tamchī kōyū dūngā lō rōchī sāñyā sāñyā gōpa lā, ngī ñamlī, lām ñamlī chēpa lā kāngā kāchī tēpi nē, duñ tēlē simchān lē pāntō dīlē chēwā chī mē, simchān tamchī kōyū dūngā lō rōchī sāñyā sāñyā gōpa dīlē dā duñ chēwā chī mē bā rēs. Chī sāñyā dīnī kī duñ chēmbō dūgē duñ dā lā ngī ñamlī chēpa lā kāngā tēpi nē, ngī dūngā suyā chī ñamlī chī tū rēs, samtā rēs wā. Dāngbō tī kī rāngī simchān tamchī kī dūñ rāñī kī sāñyā gōpa tōpa lā, lam nyamlen chechi besushi nyamlen che khores dine kanga chebe kablo suebe nyamlen che khores da niba de la zhuo semjian tamjo khorwe dunga lo zhe sanyi goba go ba la da nyalam nyamlen che ba la di nyamlen che ba ya den dile che wa chi me ba ren za dine ki nyamlen che khores dine ji chebe kabla kanga chebe kablo dunga da do le suebe nyamlen che khores that is one.
So the 39th and 40th verse we read together. So in the 39th verse in the third line and the 40th verse in the fourth line, we see the third line from the 39th verse that one's own goal is the attainment of enlightenment, this genuine great purpose. This is my goal. So for me to achieve my goal, I will deal skillfully with all that I encounter. I will experience every situation as an opportunity to cultivate inner strength, to be of inner strength and inner skill, to progress towards my attainment of enlightenment. Then with the 40th verse, this is made clearer. How can I not forbear for the sake of the happiness of my greaters? Because whilst my genuine great purpose is for me to attain enlightenment, the reason I want to attain enlightenment is for the sake of my creators, for the sake of all suffering mother sentient beings. So therefore, so as to ease their suffering, I will endure any hardship. So here we see how the 39th and 40th verse sit together. The 39th verse makes clear this is my goal, and the 40th verse, why it is my goal.
안don다 라 직제 당원이게 배 당보다 니번이 배디게 두치는 삼다제 다 체디점이 디기주에 동아세라 데니게 강아지 수연에 직배 진도 제고 제거로 와서 데니게 제투고를 데니 지고로 와서 데니 제투가 나다 된 첨보 샘전 탐지게 된다라 상이 랑이 상교 고방 투비치르 다 샘전 탐지 상교 고방을 고야게 된다라 된 첨보 딜레 하바지메 현된 주야라 현된 탈 주야의 현심전 저 코위 동안을 산조고 봐 내게 딜레 된쳐와지메 다 랑든 주바나 랑심전 탐지게 된다 산조고 봐 도바 딜레 된쳐와지메 세상 되니게 된 첨부 니 주야리야 다 남냠네 장슈sem군에 나제 진바 수전수와 파진주기 냠는 제고 다 마신데 탑미도 제고도 선배게다 되니게 배주의 제제 준주의 제제 냠는 제고래스 안도시는 안 되네가 까방을 태워도 까불 어다 되네가 어데네게 냠는 제가 강아 태워도야라 안 제박 수배 당도 렌제 강아 당도 렌비 수고 냠는 제고래스 되네 제바이나 안 되네게 강아디게나 소수게 강아 남도 켜와서 차고래스 되네게 냠는 제고래스 다저 먼저 안절야다 랍샬마소나 말 람된스네 안두시네 다 게시시왈레 쳔비게 디스투스 나와레 남고르바 데네 자나가는 주기네 데네게 삼다제 아디 베디게 삼다 두셰스 제바체 삼다 데네게 다 소소라랑기네 어다 제이티시질이야 당에 심자 탐지게 되는 산요고바 토벌쇼 쳔비게 삼다 산요고바 토비 칠도에 다 류노제께서다 제바 탐제 샬리야 당기 쳔비게 삼로지다 데네 류가 유스묘관에 샬레 뇌바다 체외 자와서야 자와진의 지금의 쳔비게도 추림 데네 삼다 데네기 계획 냠는 제바 등의 지게 전주sem다 니제로 소파다 데네기 고미야의 샬레 펜버주에 야고르에서 게디낭이 딜레 하바지 야고 야가지도 요말에 쳔비게다 가와 곰네 전주삼 무디링이 냠는 지긴 셈베 삼다야다 데네 강아 치리 갑려 세바 데네기 다시 된체 뭐디네 주비알에 강아 돼서 채와다 데네디 강아디 가고 싶마 셈비기다 파케도 센데 세바 곰제 도스 냠는 제디게 동안주에 도수시네 근데 지게 제 강 투두 가지고 배서 시고래서 당아주 송한 장아주 데네기 라렌다야야 배서 강 투두 제투도 당아주 제고고로 와 당아주 차사 지바래 차사 도시네 제고고래 송거다지 이게 시시월에 침배도 수행한 줄랍지 나와래 나와서 안주인에 되냐 강투도 지인 셈비에 삼다에 아주 계치 못 차고래
I encourage you to learn these two illustrations so that you can easily call them to mind. And learning illustrations isn't like needing to memorize the verse, but just to hold them in mind. Because recalling these two illustrations can help us to turn away from striving for this life's pleasures, striving to overcome this life's problems, but to rather focus on something of real value, of genuine great purpose. And to also do so with the determination that we have shown in other aspects of our life and we see in society around us. We can call to mind the commitment that people show in business or in a particular profession to rise to the top of their field or to be a success in their business, or for what athletes endure for success in the sporting arena. If people can do that for ordinary things, and in my own life in the past, perhaps I've done the same, then certainly for the benefit of all mother beings, to ease the suffering of all mother beings, surely I can deal with this situation skillfully. So by calling these illustrations to mind again and again, this can serve to give us the strength of mind required to be diligent in dealing with our afflictions, to never be disheartened or to lose resolve in dealing with afflictions, because it's all too easy to once again be deceived by the afflictions and thinking, it doesn't really matter, or this is very slight. Moreover, by calling these examples to mind, it can help spur us to in our endeavors, and thereby I will also encourage you to intentionally seek out your successes and take delight in your endeavors. This is important because by persevering, one is utilizing patience, one is not being overwhelmed by a circumstance, and by doing so with joy, with enthusiasm, then one is enabled to continue one's training repeatedly over a sustained period, the indispensable formula by which one will transform one's mind. So by being enthusiastic about our forbearance, then we will transform our minds. So we can conclude there for tonight, but if you have questions, then there is time, so please feel free to ask. Okay, then thank you.